you will. They're forced to negotiate with this, World Bank, International Monetary Fund, Bank of England, and these are not comfortable events for them to negotiate without having mastered the arguments of inevitable failure and singular solution. I'd love to be slammed in the same room with Timothy Geithner myself, but these people are like I am, just people, and they haven't mastered the fact of cause, fundamental cause, and singular solution. They're defenseless where they're going. And then by treading into that area, unprepared as they are, they in turn develop fear. Well, these people plant threats against them. Well, if you'll do this, we'll cut off your that. If you do that, we'll cut off all this. The people of Iceland will starve. We will be laughing. We will own your country. That's an exaggeration, of course, but, they are threats, and they're not even ambiguous.
I don't necessarily think that they're idle threats either, Mike, because I think Argentina was a prime example of the IMF, sticking the boot in, so to speak.
Sure, absolutely. But the thing is, if Argentina, which, is a very European-like country, if it mastered the arguments and put its own foot down, it would be a whole different story. Because, after all, these banks want all this money. Okay, fine. Here it is. What is this money, this irredeemable promise to pay? I'm going to pay you right now. Here it is. And I'll sign my name to it. And there you are. And what do? Well, we're going to cut off all your funding to do this. You'll never borrow any money from us again. Thank you very much. Because we will publish our own promissory obligation notes, just like in my parable of perfect economy, except it's for real. It's like, what are these guys in our business for anyway? These people are interventionists. They have no business in publishing the money that our country depends on, monetizing our wealth, laundering the principal into their possession, and then multiplying the first falsified indebtedness into terminal indebtedness, and then keeping us there forever with one boot on our throat and the other up our you-know-what. No thank you. In fact, you're not welcome in our country anymore.
Yeah, actually, that kind of brings up a question as to what happens with all of the what used to be public resources that are now privatized, such as the electricity and the gas and whatever else, hydro they would call it, but we call it electricity. So, those kind of things, natural resources of the country that are now in private hands.
Well, each country will have to resolve those issues however it deems fit. My personal opinion is that once something needfully must be recognized as a vital public infrastructure, it has no business being in private hands operated for unearned profit. That is, by the leverage of this banking system, we could take over all the power, utility companies in the world, in each country, all right, easily. And then we could charge exorbitant prices for producing electricity. Say it costs us a half a cent a kilowatt hour to produce electricity. We charge the public 35 cents. All right, and you can imagine what disorder and further injustice that would precipitate. So the choices of the country are to nationalize the privatized infrastructure, or to submit it to regulation, which allows it to operate at legitimate margins of profit, but not to exploit us by the leverage of being the only provider of our electrical power upon which we depend upon, bringing us to our knees to pay 35 cents kilowatt hour for electricity that costs half a cent to produce. So those are our two options. Mathematically perfected economy is a perfection of the system to sustain our commercial interaction between each other, just commercial interaction. Now, in this case that we're evaluating here, we have an unjust intervention, if you will, a thing we call capitalism, which is leveraging an advantage into even further disadvantage of our market. And that's not just commercial endeavor by any stretch of the imagination. So I say every country of the world has a right to nationalize. And just by the way, this mandate prevents the privatization of public infrastructures, these roads that are being sold to foreign countries and whatnot. This is outlawed by this mandate. So we have to understand the difference between true, desirable, just industrial production and manipulation, which seeks to gain advantages which translate to means to exploit the subject people. The latter is absolutely a crime against us. And it's not a matter that anyone who engages in just endeavor would even consider. This is something that may never go away completely because people are capable of committing evil. But I would expect that, let's just say that the sources of electricity for this particular country of our example are hydroelectric plants. Well, we could say, well, this water belongs to all of us. We built a dam. It's like, this is what you can do. You have 14 people who work here. You have an emergency crew of so many furthers. This costs so much. That translates to about half a cent a kilowatt hour for electricity for the entire country. And excuse us, those are the only people producing anything here. and that's all we're giving you, and that's that, you know. So you can rectify these things, and you have to decide to do it, you know. People are attacking, you know, Hugo Chavez for many years as if he's a socialist. Well, you know, all I see, and you know, I could be wrong about this, of course, but I see a person who's attempting to restore the rightful personal prosperity of a free country, you know, and there are difficult challenges in the way of that, and you know, the people who accuse him of being a socialist are not necessarily correct at all. And what's wrong about that from our point of view is that we shouldn't just allow people to to slander a person liberally in such a way, likely because you know, they have an axe to grind, they have a personal ulterior motive, which they would certainly divulge to us if they weren't themselves ashamed of it. So, you know, the name-calling stuff, you know, leads you to smell a skunk right away. I mean, smell the sulfur in Chavez's terms, which I stood up and gave him a one-man standing ovation when I heard that.
I tend to agree with you, actually, though, Mike, because I mean, I've looked a little bit into the story of Hugo Chavez too, and I think it was about 10% of the population of Venezuela were actually benefiting from 90% of the wealth of Venezuela, and of course a big portion of that was the oil and gas industry. I think, is it Stanley Oil, I think was the name of the original company down there?
I'm not sure. Standard Oil, I thought, was down there.
Yeah, it could be Standard then. I know it was something similar to that. But I think what happened is that when he came into power in 1998, he actually set up an actual people's constitution, and probably the only true constitution throughout the world, because it was one that was created and mandated by the people of Venezuela, whereas a lot of the constitutions of existing countries were actually set up by the elites and the powers of the country a long time ago. You know, the people never had anything to do with it.
Yeah. Exactly,
yeah, the American Constitution included, yeah, and especially the Canadian. I mean, that was pretty much set up by Quebec and Newfoundland, Labrador, and then, you know, ratified and changed slightly by the English Parliament before it came back and became the British North American Act. So I think he has been a true a true father, if you like, of a constitution in Venezuela, and also, as you rightly say, trying to return the wealth and power of the country back to the people.
Right.
And he was ousted for it in 2002. Fortunately, he had a lot of supporters, not least of which was most of the population of Venezuela, who got him back in power. And I believe, funnily enough, the majority of the people who took cabinet positions, and that of the president, ending up actually in the USA, which probably says a lot for the reason behind the coup in the first place.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And a Chief Gage, I saved several copies of it, actually. There was a video that was circulating years back. It was "The Revolution Will Not Be Televised." You may
have that too.
Yeah. Well, the thing that's striking about that, I mean, here you have such a beloved political leader accused of such dark things by people here, for instance. And yet, riding down the streets of